welcome everyone. Today we'll be having a look at point clouds and how we can go about getting a feature survey of the point cloud up and ready to go. So the first area you're going to want to look at is to pre-process your point cloud. To do this, I very much recommend using Autodesk's Recap Pro. Recap Pro allows you to very quickly import and view point clouds, allowing you to change the display of how it operates. We'll talk about color maps and all that, how you can modify them, how you want them to look, along with being able to check your scan locations, being able to check bubble view. So if your scanner is able to pick that up, you're able to select those bubbles and zoom in on those locations. You are able to set up classifications. This will be something that we look at once we've actually gotten into working with Recap in the live part of this session. Cropping and deleting to minimize the amount of points being transferred across Civil 3D, along with decimating and exporting out to various Autodesk programs. We'll be focusing on exporting out to Civil 3D today. However, at the end, we will also have a look at Autodesk Connect, the Autodesk platform that allows you to basically connect all your data together, allowing one person to look at it and then handing it off to another. And it's built-in recap function, allowing you to draft inline work, get buildings ready, and all that, which Shane alluded to earlier. Once you've done your pre-processing in Recap Pro, you're then going to want to actually build a surface, work with it, create points and that for drafting purposes. You would work on Civil 3D for that. I've gotten ahead of myself though. The color maps where we're going to look at next. The color map allows you to decide how your point cloud is going to be visualized. So you're able to change this very quickly in Recap. We've got a number of different ways to work with this, RGB being the most common. This allows you to set the real, in quotation mark, colors as picked up by your scanner. For example, you've picked up a tree, the tree will be shown green for the leaves, depending on the tree you picked up, brown for the bark, all that fun stuff. Elevation, so you can set up elevation ranges along with the colors attached to each range. Intensities, depending on the scanner you've got, it'll pick up the intensity of the laser to assign a value to the point, and we're able to visualize that intensity. Normals, again, picked up by your device. Scan location, so if you've done a point cloud and you picked up multiple sections of that point cloud, you're actually able to set it up so that you can visualize each section individually. And again, classification, allowing you to assign different classifications to your points. And depending on your scanner, this can either be done in the field, and when you've imported, you're able to classify it, or set up your classifications there, or you can manually classify it, or you can automatically classify it. We'll be going through manual classification, automatic classification today. So hopefully everyone looks forward to that. But again, once you've gone ahead and done all this, you're then going to go ahead and edit your point cloud. Once that's done, you're going to export it out to Civil 3D. Civil 3D, again, allows you to import and view your recap point clouds, allows you to create a surface. You can create this out of either a portion, a selection of your point cloud, or the entire thing. You can also filter out different points based on different elevation ranges using the non-ground filtering option, which we'll talk about more in a second. From here, you can do the general Civil 3D things. You can do your surface editing, point creation, point group control, point cloud color map could also be set here. So anything you've done in Recap can be mimicked here for visualization purposes. And you can do further cropping as needed. So I mentioned non-ground filtering for filtering out points based on elevation ranges. You've got three different options here: planar average, the Kriging interpolation, and no filter. I generally find Kriging to be the best option here. What it does is it finds out an average of all your points, and it's going to use a curving method to basically filter out anything above that elevation range. It'll spike up where it finds things like trees, cars, and all that, as you can see in the little diagram there. And from there, it's able to get a better estimate of your surface, in my opinion. If you're using planar average, it takes all of the points, finds an average value across all your points, and then filters it out anything above that average. very much a heavy-handed method. Very useful depending on the survey you're working with. I find it to be a bit too heavy-handed, though, in my opinion. And no filter, as the name implies, doesn't apply any kind of elevation filter. It'll create a surface at every single point in your point cloud, uh, unless you're picking up something relatively flat with no major change in elevation, or you've done an extremely good job of cropping and deleting your points. I would not recommend no filter as an option. But this is my opinion. If you like using one of these methods over the other, don't hesitate to use it. They are all very good tools to use. So you might be asking, we've gone through the CAD options. We've looked at Recap. We've looked at Civil 3D. Where does Stringer come into this? Well, Stringer comes into this in terms of your line work, creating all that up, creating objects in your drawing, that kind of a thing. So you can create the points, you can create core locations along your point cloud using a variety of different tools that we'll discuss today. And then using those points, we're able to very quickly, well, automate all your line work. So you can see in the example off to the side here, I picked up the center line and edge of a road. I've gone ahead and created some points along there manually, very, very quickly. And I'm able to very quickly get all my line work created and set up ready to go. From there, I'm able to do any editing I may wish to do. I can modify the points, I can modify the line work, I can get a 3D model if I desire. I can create objects on that 3D model if need be, and I can do things such as create scalable objects such as trees, pits, uh, lights, all that fun stuff. So it's a very powerful tool to add on at the end once you've gone ahead and you've done all of your prior edits. So the way I envision a workflow being, this is how I've worked on things on my end, is I see users importing point clouds into Recap, modifying how they want it to look, classifying, decimating the point cloud as needed. From there, cropping and deleting points further through a more focused method, exporting that data out to Civil 3D. So then you move into the Civil 3D side of things where you're going to attach a point cloud to the Civil 3D drawing, create a Civil 3D surface, create the core points along the point cloud as needed. Then you can create your stringer data, which will include your line work and all that. And then you can create a 3D model from there as needed. So it's a very general workflow. You may not need some of these parts. You may require some other ones. If you do need any help with this after the session today, don't hesitate to reach out to us. But on that, let's have a look at a live demonstration. So I'm just going to switch over to Recap here. So I've just got Recap open, ready to go. And we're going to start a new project. So selecting a new project, it's going to ask, do you want to bring in photo to 3D or a point cloud? We'll be working with point clouds today, but if you're curious about the photo to 3D version, please let us know. We're always looking for feedback on these sessions and what we can look at helping you guys with next. So we'll work with a point cloud for now. It's going to ask us for a project name. So I'm just going to call this one CSS Building 2. You're able to choose where this is going to be saved. I'm just saving to the default location. Select the files you want to import. So if you're doing it on an individual basis, I recommend this option. You can see it's opening up to a default location. I'll talk about that in a sec. But you also have the ability to bring in an entire folder. If you've gone out and you've picked up a number of scans from different locations, wanting to merge them all together, this is more likely to be the way that you go. Allows you to select a folder of your choosing, and any point clouds within that folder will be pulled in. But in this case, so we're saving a bit of time on processing and such, we'll be selecting a pre-processed file. So I'll select this here. You've got a number of RCP files in this location. I'm just going to choose this one here, which is one I've pre-set up. Now, if you've pulled in one that hasn't been processed before, this will start loading. Once it's fully done, it'll basically appear here fully. It won't have a blue circle surrounding it anymore. You can launch a project once the first one's done. So if you brought in multiple, once the first one has been processed, you'll be able to launch the project. And as you're in the project viewing space, Once they finish processing, they will appear for you to work with. So we'll go launch project. Everything's going to appear for us. So it's just loading in now. And the way to navigate around here is middle mouse button to pan around. You can scroll using the middle mouse button to zoom in and out. And if you hold shift and then press down your middle mouse button, you can orbit around. So anyone's curious about how you maneuver, that's how you go about doing so. Once you've imported all of your information here, so you've got everything set up, you're ready to start looking at working with it, you can change how you want it to be displayed, and your display options can be found here. So under the first one, you have your different color map options. So say I wanted to change it over to the intensity. I can change that and you can see how the laser has reflected based on the color scheme you see here. If you want to change it over to something like elevation, you can, or a variety of other ones, as I discussed within the PowerPoint. You have other options to work with here, like lighting settings. You can change the point display, or you can change a variety of things here. I don't find these ones to be particularly useful. I primarily stick within the first three here, and even then, I mostly just switch to color mode, which is why I discussed them in further detail earlier. If you're needing to select anything in this view, so let's say I want to classify an area, you can simply maneuver yourself so that you can very easily see what you want. I find using a side-on view, so I want to select all these cars here. I like going into as much of a side-on view as possible. Then I can very easily just use the selection tool. So that was just holding down the right mouse button and then selecting the area. And then down the bottom, you've got a variety of tools to work with. We'll talk about Clip more later on, as I like working with that at a later stage in this. But if you need to separate this data out, you've got the ability to create a new region. This allows you to zoom back in on this location at any time using the region controls found over here. But you've also got the ability to classify this data. If you have not classified this automatically using your scanner, this is where you can manually do it. So if we select this, it'll actually say, okay, what classification do you want to assign to the points you have selected? There are 12 in here by default, which you can see listed, and then you've got a number of them set as reserved. Reserved are ones that you are freely able to customize. They don't have any standard basis to be able to use from. The first 12 are ones that are commonly used by surveyors, so I would recommend leaving these as is, only changing the ones from 13 up. In this case, we're not too fussed about what they're going to switch to, but you can assign them as needed. Click assign, that's going to assign those classifications. And you can see if we go over to this database icon here, classifications, we now have one set. And if I toggle that off, you can see they're now hidden. One thing to keep in mind, even if you hide the classification, it does not work the same as how Clip will later on. This purely hides them. They can still be selected and they can still be edited. So keep that in mind. This will only turn off the display. We'll talk about Clip and delete later on, but the last option here is clear, and that just clears your selection that you have set. So very easy to work with. Next up, what I would like to do is basically configure how I want this to work. Depending on what you're going to be doing with this point cloud, you'll probably run one, if not both, of the next steps. If you go up to Home, you can come across here to these two options. You'll have to hover over the automatic ground classifications for the bottom one to occur. But these are the automatic ground classification and the decimate points options. Both of these are very handy in quickly filtering out the data in your point cloud, ready to be brought across into Civil 3D. Now, if you're just looking to get a surface out of this, you're not too fussed about having the features or anything, I recommend just quickly running automatic ground classification. Running this, it's going to basically just ask us to save it, and then it will go ahead. I won't run this at the moment. We'll see the results for it shortly. Once that's run, it's going to go ahead and try and separate everything out based on whether or not it thinks that it's working with ground or if it's working with a object that isn't a part of the natural surface. So it'll automatically run through and do that. And in my experience, it actually does a pretty good job of filtering all that out. It's not perfect. You will have to go through and manually do some clipping or deletion, but it is a very powerful tool. The other option, if you're wanting to retain the majority of your data here, is decimate points. Decimate points allows you to separate your data out into different classifications. So you can see here, I currently have source classification as reserved. I'm going to export out a part of my point cloud into a different classifications, in this case, model key point. And you're able to you're able to decimate by either an approximate percentage. So if you just want a general amount to be removed, use that. Or you can go by approximate number of points. It'll go ahead and list the entirety of the points in your drawing. And you're able to filter out by whatever number you decide. So you can see I have this obscene number here to work with, and I'm able to filter out as many as I want. It'll place all those into the target classification, ready for you to work with as needed. Now, this can take some time depending on A, if you've already gone ahead and deleted or clipped points already in your drawing, and B, how many you're working with. So if I move this up to 50%, for instance, it's going to go ahead and decimate at 50. That's going to take longer than if I set it to something like 10% for obvious reasons. Depending on your laptop will be how long it processes for. I recommend setting that up and then going and getting a coffee or going for a walk or something, depending on the size of what you're working with. So we're just going to go back to the home screen, and I'm going to open up a drawing, the exact same drawing, that's already been classified and has had a decimate run on it. So we're on this one here. You can see it's a little bit more blurry when I move around. That's a result of the decimation because it's not a part of the decimation. It's just separate everything out. If I go down to the classification here, you can see that I have two here to work with. This is the result of that automatic ground classification that we ran earlier. If we open that up, you can see I've got two here to work with. And if I hide the ground, you can see how it's gone ahead and it's ripped out everything it thinks is not a part of the ground. It's done a pretty good job with that. So if we turn back on the ground now and we switch this around, you can see it's not quite perfect, but it's done a pretty good job of it. So we'll clean this up. But first off, let's get rid of these points. We're looking to create a surface out of this. We're not really interested in the other features here, like building. We only want the base pad of it. So to get rid of these, there's a number of ways to do so. You can just select this option here, delete classification. This will just say, hey, look, you're deleting this. This is going to remove all the points from here. You can go delete. It's going to go ahead and strip all of them out. If you want a more focused approach, I like, again, just getting a bit of a side-on view. And then just use the select tool. So again, just right-clicking and selecting what I don't think I need. And you've got the ability to either clip or delete. Depending on what you're requiring will depend on which one you're using. If you're just wanting to turn these off basically temporarily, you're not looking to permanently export with all that included, just use clip. So we'll just go clip inside. That's going to remove all that excess data. If I export at this point, all those points won't go with it, but I can very quickly go unclip all to bring that data that I just removed back. On the other hand, if I wanted to delete it, not on a permanent basis, but a more, advanced basis, I can select everything again, and this time go delete. If delete is run, you'll see there's no undo option. I can't quickly go back, but provided you don't run save as, you can come up to home, and there is an option here that allows you to recover deleted points. Any points that have been deleted, including by the classification, will be brought back by this option. Further to this, any points that have been removed via classification can tend to export when you run the export command I'll talk about later. If you remove via classification, I highly recommend going to Home, dropping down the save icon and going Save As, and then just saving this as a new RCP file. That will force your deletion to remain and will remove, or it'll make the file smaller, but it'll also shrink the base point cloud. So it creates a new point cloud out of this, and which will be of a small size and allow you to work with it. If you're importing the Civil 3D, this is a very important step, as a smaller point cloud means it's going to run faster and better. I also recommend doing that anyway, just so that you have a original point cloud file in case you do need to revert back to the original. It just allows you to have a backup in case. So a very important feature in my opinion. Yep. From there, you pretty much just go ahead and fiddle with it until you get something that you like, that you've exported, well, you're ready to export the data that you wish to work with. And the way you go about exporting, there are two ways to do so. If you're working or if you're planning to work more with the building side of things, so this is getting your internal walls, working with architectural side of things and all that, I recommend running the publish command. Publish will push it out to your Autodesk Cloud and will allow you to run the recap version on the Autodesk Cloud, along with Revit and a number of other functions, which we'll go through later, and allow you to very quickly draft that up. The other option, if you're working more of a feature survey, you're just wanting to get the basics out and work with them in Civil 3D, I recommend running the export command found here. Export will allow you to export this data out as an RCP file. So we'll call this one CSS new. And we can very quickly push that out. At the end, it's going to ask us to unify the scan data. So this is just going to merge all your separate point clouds together if you've done so, and then push it out ready for a Civil 3D import. So let's go unify my project scan. Is going to go through and export all this out. It shouldn't take us too long. And see it's going ahead and doing that. Yeah. The other option that you saw in that home ribbon was the ability to import. If you have other files you're wishing to attach after the initial import, you can just select that option, the one right below export, and you are able to bring in additional files as needed. This includes additional folders. So if you've gone out day one, done a large amount of your scan, imported it to make sure everything's good, realize that something's missing or you need to go back, do the survey again, it gets imported, it's exported from your scanner as a folder. You can import both that folder and the individual files depending on what you need. So seems I've exported a few too many points for this to quickly be done, but we'll just skip ahead for now. And I'll just go straight to Civil 3D. Cool. Bit of a sneak peek. It's because it's trying to export that point cloud at the same time. So we're going to work with, at first, a blank point cloud here. So working with a blank drawing, there is nothing that's been imported into this. And we're going to look at importing in a point cloud ready to go. To do so, all you need to do is go to Insert on your ribbon. And from here, you've got the ability to attach a point cloud. Select that option. It's going to navigate to a default location. I've got mine set to here, and you're able to import from there. I've already got a CSS row decimated RCP file, so I'll work with that for now. But the other one that was exporting would also be found here, as I've got this set as by default. So I'm just going to select that. If anyone's brought in a PDF or an image before, this screen will look very familiar. You're able to specify on screen where you want it to be. You can specify the path type. You're able to scale things as needed or even rotate it. I'm just going to leave it on basics for now, so it's going to import at a 0, 0, 0. I'm going to go OK. and you can see how quickly that gets imported in. Admittedly, this has been modified a bit more heavily than the one we just exported, but not to a vastly different degree. From here, you can select the point cloud. That will open up the point cloud part of the ribbon and allow you to do a variety of different things. First up, you've got the ability to, well, modify the display of it. So pretty much this entire first section is set to that. Changing the point size is going to change the size of the point. So you can see it becomes a lot more dense looking as I push that up. I generally keep it on a 2 as I find that to be a good balance between knowing if I've decimated too far or if it's got some holes I need to look at patching by going back to recap. You saw how quick it was to be able to bring in that point cloud. It's not a big thing, at least in my opinion, to just quickly go back to recap, fill in any holes you might need, and then come back here. You could even import another point cloud as needed. Level of detail, you're able to turn that on and off as needed. So it's just changing the density of that point cloud. If you find you're having some lag once you've imported, I recommend just modifying this. It might make it a bit easier for you to work with. The scan colors option you see here works much the same way as it did within Recap. Switch between these. If I switch over to intensity, you can see that I'm able to switch between these. And if you wish to change the color mapping, you can go in here to change the color map for intensity, elevation, and classification as needed. The classifications will be set to whatever they were in Recap. So if you've set them up manually, automatically, or via your scanner, they will come in and you'll be able to work with them as needed, shown here. Oh, whoops. Clicked too many times. Once you start actually working with the point cloud, transparency becomes a very useful tool. The point cloud, I find, kind of is dense enough that it's hard to see when you've worked with points. I like just turning this up a bit as I work through it. Creates a transparency for other objects you may create, allowing you to very quickly be able to work with them. If you need to crop your point cloud further at this stage, past the recap point, you do have the ability to crop out using rectangular, polygonal, or circular. I still much prefer doing this in Recap. Recap provides a much nicer environment to do this. I find doing it at this stage to be slightly laggy depending on how many points are here, but it's up to you when you want to run it. It's just preference for me. Section plane can be very useful though. Section plane allows you to basically remove certain aspects from your database here. So if I realized I really don't need something on the vertical plane, I can create a top one. And if I spin it around here, you can see that we've got a vertical plane to work with. And if I click on this arrow here, I'm able to remove or add. Oops, I've clicked on the wrong thing. You can see how I'm cropping stuff out as I move this up and down. This allows you to very quickly go ahead and just work as a visualizing tool for that. Don't have to just work on a top-down perspective. If I escape out of this, just remove him from play. You can also work on a front to back, left to right, whichever way you're wanting to work with it. It can be a very handy tool for just very quickly removing certain sections of your point cloud from play. If you're working with buildings especially, this can be used to very quickly separate out the floors, allowing you to go ahead and do any edits you may need. If you brought in multiple point clouds to Civil 3D, the Point Cloud Manager allows you to toggle these on and off as needed. So if I toggle this off here, you can see that it gets removed from play. Very handy if you've got multiple that you've stacked up against each other. I brought in one once with, I think it was something like 18 different setups that we'd done. And this was very handy for being able to go through and turn off different aspects of the building so that I could do rooms individually. So if you're needing to do that, this is a good way to do it. Also handy if you've got too much data here, you've got a lagging kind of computer, turn this on and off. It allows you to get a quite substantive speed increase to your PC. So it can be very handy for that. So once you've got the point cloud imported and ready to go, you're then wanting to work with creating a surface. So you go create surface from point cloud. You can see that it's highlighted what it believes to be the point cloud we're wanting to work with. You're able to go ahead and choose the style of the surface, exactly the same as if you're working with the Civil 3D surface tool. Point cloud selected allows you to basically choose, excuse me, uh, excuse me, allows you to choose whether or not you want to work with a selection of points, if you want to remove certain points, or if you just want to work with the full thing. Just using these options here, you'll get an idea of what you're working with. You can see here how many points I'm working with, a vastly lower number than what we saw earlier. The rough distance between each of those points. And then if we go to the non-ground point filtering, you get those three options that we discussed earlier. As I stated, I primarily use the kriging interpolation function. I find that one to be the one that gives me the most accurate surface while still removing a lot of the objects I don't wish, followed by the planar average and then the no filter, in my opinion. Depending on the option you choose, once you go create a surface, the software will go ahead and start creating a surface. You'll get an icon down the bottom corner here, just saying the surface is being created. You can still continue working. You can still continue working on anything that you want within the drawing. However, I will state if you make any edits to your point cloud, things like cropping and such, be aware that this can cancel the surface creation. You will get a message saying that it has been cancelled, but it can happen if you edit the point cloud in such a direct way. Things such as changing the scan colors, creating new points, all that, you're completely fine. It's more the removal or editing of an already existing point cloud. So you just keep that in mind. So, what happens after the surface is created? Well, you'll get something along the lines of this. So this is the exact same point cloud we just saw, but I've gone ahead and already created a surface. If we drop this down here, you'll see that one's been created. More than likely, the surface will be too large for Civil 3D to handle, depending on how many points you picked up. It'll just ask, are you sure you want to export? Are you sure you want to work with this as a visual display? So it'll create that surface in a separate file, which then links into this, allowing you to work with it as needed. So I just hit accept to that, and then I'm able to go ahead and do what's needed. After all this has been imported, the step I'm most likely to choose is I'm going to want to create some line work. So how do we go about creating our line work? Well, we need some points to work off of. And I don't mean point cloud points, I mean points with a code and a string number attached to them so you're able to work with them. I like making sure I'm in a position that I can see everything. So same as recap, I like being on a side on kind of position. I've just realized I've moved us a bit too far at the moment. So I'm just going to switch back to top once it's finished generating its contours. So if you rotate it around, because we've got a 3D space we'll work with as we're working in Civil 3D, it's generating the contours live. So as I rotate around, it's trying to give us the best representation of that. I close this just to free up a bit of space. My computer's probably overclocking at the moment as it's running a lot of high-end programs. While we're waiting for that to load, are there any questions to discuss, Shane?
Jack, there are no live questions at this stage. There was a general question about processing that survey data, but that was answered. So we have no live questions. I will just say while you've got it open that we do pass our thanks onto the RealServe team. So there's an organization in Victoria called RealServe. They actually came out and did this survey of our building and surrounds, and that's the data that we're referencing today. So Maybe at the end, Jack, we'll just open up their webpage for anyone interested in these sorts of services.
Yep, definitely. All right. So I finished processing, closing all that down. You can see it was a lot faster in going back to a top-down perspective. And let's create some points along this center line here. So all I'm going to do is I'm using native Civil 3D tools. I'm going to drop down points. I like working off of the surface itself, so I go random points. If you are wanting to just create points manually, you can toggle on your grid, sorry, not your grid, your snap to drawing grid, and then you can use your snap tools here. You can switch over to 3D object snap and set these up. It'll then go ahead and snap to the point cloud for creating those points. But because we've got the surface created from this, I like going off of the surface. So surface random points. I'm selecting the surface I wish to work with. So that's this one here. And then I can go ahead and start creating these. So it's just location for new point. Let's go here. Enter a point code. So 40101 for our center line. And I'm just going to create a few points along here. You can see how quickly I'm just going ahead and making these. And we'll create another one over here. We'll call this one O2 for a new string. So once we've gone ahead and made those points, we can then go over to Stringer Topo, and this is where we can automate our line creation. We've set up those points. Those points have a code and string attached to them. So let's turn on the transparency so we can actually see all of our points. So we can see our points being created here. And I'm going to go Stringer Topo, create our strings. And now for anyone using Stringer, we're back in Stringer land. So I can set it up for numeric, contourable, create the survey strings. That's on me. That's because I set it up at a 0 elevation and I have this set to ignore anything below 0. So let's try that again. So we see it's gone ahead and it's created the strings ready for us to go. Now, looks a bit messy at the moment. That's because I very quickly went ahead and did that. But if we then go properties, we can start doing things like, well, we could have done this earlier. I'm just doing it at this stage, but I'm attaching a .f to this code here. Going to go up to this one. We're going to attach a, so we're two selected, .l, and then a 40102. And then if we go back to Stringer and we go update strings, you can see it's now got that curve. So it's curving around there. We've got it connecting both of those up at once. We turn back on, well, off the transparency. Let's change the color of that string so we can actually see them a bit better. We can see it's hugging that center line pretty accurately for me putting in those points very quickly. And you can go around and do that rapidly to all of your survey, very quickly getting objects in as needed, putting points in, getting your trees, getting pits in at a very quick rate. Allows you to get your line work set up very quickly, ready to go for your next step. Once you've gone ahead and set that up, I won't show it today just because it does take a while to open, but you can run Model Viewer. Model Viewer will open up a 3D model of your surface and you're able to overlay your line work on it. As it stands, I've actually created 3D polylines out of this, and we can see that represented here. It's sitting pretty much directly across our surface. Not as clean now that I've moved it and the surface moved. You can see that line work sitting there. But if you're wanting to get this in a 3D model space that's very rapid, very quick to move around in, I highly recommend running Model Viewer up. It'll allow you to visualize everything very quickly, very neatly, very, well, fun, in my opinion, and craft objects over the top of it, depending on what you've created. Personally, I will generally do up some trees and run those up. Uh, and it allows me to very quickly just see the trees where they're sitting, if they're overlaying anything, and how I might need to work with them. So very handy for that. But on that, we've actually gone ahead and, well, finished working with Civil 3D. From here, it's just a matter of drafting up the rest of the plan and then getting it ready for release to a client. But if you're working with buildings and that, I actually recommend, just give me a second, I'm just going to open up a different PowerPoint. If you're working with buildings, I highly recommend exporting to running the publish command in Recap, which allows you to push out to the Autodesk cloud and using Recap Viewer. Now, sadly, I don't have a live example ready for us today, but Autodesk have provided us with a video on it that I'll just quickly talk over. Okay, let's do it the manual way since it doesn't seem to like playing at the moment. So what we are able to do with Recap Pro is basically set it up so that we're able to work with it. You're able to create a scan to mesh. Now, the scan to mesh is going to look over the entirety of your survey and turn your point cloud, well, not turn your point cloud, create a surface mesh out of the point cloud that you've got. From there, you're able to, well, as it states, very quickly create classifications to work with. And from this, you're able to also select basically walls out of the point cloud. The software is smart enough to select a dense amount of points and say, okay, this seems to be a wall. We're going to set it up as such. You can then export this out to Revit. So any Revit users in the audience, you're able to export all this out and use it for your architectural drawings. One of the big things about Autodesk products is that they all are able to talk to each other. So you saw how easily I was able to go from Recap out to Civil 3D. It's just as easy to go from Recap out to Revit ready to work with. So this is actually creating a number of different files here. So this is working with the photo section we talked about earlier. The photos are used to create a 3D mesh that we're able to create points on. But after you've worked with that, you're able to export up, publish it out to the Autodesk cloud, where you're able to work in an online space. One of the biggest benefits about this online space is the fact that anyone who's attached to the project can view it. So if I published it up for myself and link Shane into the project, for instance, Shane would be able to also do any edits on it at the same time, and we could see each other working on it in real time. This is a very powerful tool. It also allows you to use feature extraction, linear feature extraction, extracting various things such as the edge of bitumen in 3 separate lines at the same time, or your center of road, things like that, or especially your buildings, getting things such as that out. Yeah, a very powerful tool allowing you to work with it. Same as Civil 3D's project manager, you're able to work with multiple point clouds at the same time, publishing up multiple at the same time, attaching them to an individual project. So you can see here he has project scans and multiple under it, allowing you to well, the user would be able to see all three of those at the same time. This is the linear feature extraction I talked about, where they're able to very quickly go around to do it. For more accurate line work, I do think Stringer has the upper hand. It allows you to very quickly and accurately get your points down and create line work from it. But this is a good alternative if you do not have access to Stringer.